I've had the privilege to work in the business education sector now for almost 30 years with John Byrne and of course the team at Poets and Quants and many other ventures. And it's been an absolute pleasure over that period of time to know my next guest, Sean Meehan. Sean Meehan began his career at IMD close to 25 years ago, and I've been very lucky to know him for much of that time. As well as being the Martin Hilty Professor of Marketing, he has been the Dean of the MBA program on 2 distinct occasions, including this current tenure until the end of this year. Sean, it's always a pleasure to see you, whether on Zoom or, of course, many of the live events that we've shared together.
It's a real pleasure to be part of this event. Great to see you, Matt, and very fond memories of our various escapades around Europe at various fairs and so on. So great to see you.
Not all of which we can describe publicly, of course, for very good reason. Now, we, as you know, have a theme of responsible leadership, and that's something that just goes hand in hand with IMD. But if you don't mind, I'd just like to ask one very personal question. As I look at your career, you are an award-winning co-author of books that have been published by the Harvard Business School Press. You have a book that's just been published, your latest. You have consulted, designed and developed programs for a who's who of the global Fortune 500. And I know firsthand that your colleagues and that your students absolutely adore you. So as we look at leadership, I'm mindful of how extraordinarily modest you are about your accomplishments and the impact that you have had. So my question is, how important is humility for great leadership?
You know, I think this is an interesting thing. I think one of the issues that we now are very focused on is reflective leadership, you know, taking the moment to think about what has happened, why it has happened, what the circumstances around what has happened, what might explain the outcome, and so on. And I think leaders need to be much better practiced at that. And I would say in that respect, I'm hopeless because I've not been a good exemplar of those things, but I learn. And I think this is one of the key elements of our responsibility for those of us who feel we have a vocation to lead, because I think this is actually, you know, it's easy to talk about leadership. Not every manager wants to be a leader. Not every manager can be a leader. Not every manager should be a leader. It is an enormous responsibility. It is not about having the top job. It is about taking responsibility for the future of other people, taking responsibility for the future of an enterprise, taking responsibility for the families of your employees. It is very, very wide ranging. And I think when you realize that, then you don't need to think of words like humility. I think you just are very, very grounded. And I think that is something that if you have a vocation for leadership, nobody needs to push you towards. Nobody needs to remind you of words. You just get on with the job. I mean, the last 18 months or so have been a real test for people of, you know, do you really accept what it means now to be a leader under these circumstances? It's easy when things are going well. You know, in the last several years, bull market, I mean, my goodness, it's a great time to be a manager, great time to be a leader. But now we have real challenges, existential challenges for some businesses. How do you handle yourself in those situations? So I think I don't think much about the issue of humility. Nobody likes the opposite. I'm very aware of that. And I think if you're just remotely observant, you can see how people react to the opposite. And I think, you know, there's no one cookie cutter that tells you this is what a leader should be, this is what a leader should look like. There are traits, there are attributes and characteristics that define individuals. And those traits and characteristics can be hugely effective in one context. Being charismatic, being very present, being dominant, hugely beneficial in some contexts. Exactly the opposite, hugely beneficial in other contexts. And I don't mean the political or economic environment. I just mean the situation in different situations. So I think, leadership is sufficiently complex for people to really, they have to work very hard at it. We have a point of view here that we don't actually teach leadership. Our MBA is I would say, the longest and most significant leadership program in the world today, outside of the Army. It is a 1-year, non-stop leadership development activity, during which we don't teach leadership. We have leadership classes. Leadership is learned. It's not taught, it's learned. It's learned by the individuals. And that is why we take so much care. And that's why we have a small cohort. We're trying to find those people who we think have the right attributes, who have the ambition, who have some of the characteristics already, who've practiced and learned behaviors already that suggest to us that they have the capacity to take great responsibility in life, irrespective of the circumstances. They're not in it to win, they're in it to take responsibility, lead, accomplish. I think accomplish is a much better word than win-loss, a much better framing. Sorry, Matt, I've
I think that's,
there.
Given our theme, I think that's a wonderful place to start. You've said in very simple terms that the IMD MBA program is a gem. And this leadership journey, this intensive experience. So how do you then sort of instill the practices, the reflection that these 90, soon to be 105, 110 as the class grows, experience during this remarkable year in Lausanne?
We have several threads. We have leadership classes where we explain theories, where we explore topics through really, I would say, in-depth picking apart. What brings these classes to life, in addition to brilliant stewardship by Jennifer Jordan, is the class itself. We've always valued how we put the class together. John, I was speaking with your colleague John Byrne and my good friend John Byrne, who was with us, and he kept asking questions about, but you do what in the admission process, and then there's this step, and then there's that step, and when you put it all together and you look at how much time we invest in every one person in the class, it is colossal, and it is unparalleled in any other school. That's not how they do it. They have different processes. They work brilliantly for them. But for us, where we're trying to find these people who can make a contribution in class when we're discussing these leadership dilemmas and topics, theories that have been well established over time, we have to give people a basis. We have to help them understand the language so that they can benefit from it. So it's the class that brings these to life, because they bring with them real experience. They generally have some experience when they come to us. They're not coming immediately from undergraduate university. So they're from their undergraduate education. So they're bringing with them some experience, and they're bringing it from all over the world. And we know that situations are very different around the world, and we know that biases, and we know that prejudices are present differently around the world. We have them, everyone has them, but they're different. And that makes for fascinating exploration and discussion in the classroom, in this learning environment. But the students have to reflect. So we teach, and we ask them, encourage them to practice reflection. Have you thought about what we discussed? Have you thought about why Matt had that point of view? Have you thought about his defense of that point of view? How do you make sense of it? So sense making, which is a critical leadership capability, needs to be offered through experience. The greatest case study that we work on is the class itself, how they interact, how they form small groups, how those small groups interact with other small groups, how those small groups based on country of origin, social life habits, little kids or not little kids. How do those social groups form? How do they interact with one another? What kind of power do they exert in discussions in the class and otherwise? Do we observe and experience microaggressions? All of these things, because we're raising the salience of these topics with the students, they can then observe them, give them a name, call them out, retreat, deal with. So this is the great case study of IMD, is the classroom itself. The other threads, a critical piece of this, we expect in our design, in our thinking about the program, we expect our participants to emerge able to deal with complexity and velocity. So things changing at great speed and things actually being rather not straightforward, being rather complex. Solutions hard to find. So we teach rather heavily in the first part of the program, I would say. I always feel that the first 4 months of the program are a little tough. Now, some of my participants will be looking at me and say, you got to be joking, a little tough? I mean, come on. And I do think that if participants, our MBAs, figure out what they're being asked to do and prioritize sensibly, I don't think it's the big drama that they tell me it is. But for 4 months, there's a lot going on. There are projects being launched outside of class. There are, in addition, there are the student-initiated activities, cluster groups around careers and so on, speakers, panels, and so on. And then there's class and getting ready for class and your obligations to your study group and so on. But the classes are so intense that there's a lot of prioritizing you have to do. And there's a lot of conflict that arises from that prioritization. So my priorities are not your priorities. I want to be home at 8 o'clock in the evening because I've got a family, blah, blah, blah. And somebody else says, this is the most important year of my life. I'm going to work until 2 in the morning, but you're in the same group. So how do you sort that out? My point is, there's pressure. There's pressure on individuals who are in a new situation, probably a new environment for them. Many are from outside of Europe, for example. They're dealing with people they don't know who are highly accomplished in their minds. Every one of our participants will have imposter syndrome, which is not a bad thing at the beginning. Every one of them will have imposter syndrome at the beginning. Oh, why me? Why am I? Oh gosh, how did I get into this group? Because they're looking across the room and seeing some incredible resumes and accomplishments. Now, those people have got to work together. That creates conflict. In addition, we're asking people to think about their lives, how they got to where they are. That raises a lot of questions. So we support our students with Jungian analysts. Every student has around about 20 hours of analyst time available during the year and on a set schedule. And I am told by them, by the students, that this is remarkably helpful and actually critical in determining how they evolve during the program. So it's a great support system. It exists slightly outside of the program because we want to have a clear Chinese wall between our program management activities and my visibility and the activities within that group. And therefore we appoint one, I would say, a senior Jungian analyst to recruit all our other analysts and to manage that activity. I don't even know who these analysts are because I don't want any suggestion that those conversations aren't super private. So this is a great source of comfort for the students who are experiencing at certain moments in the program tremendous pressure. The beginning of the program, it's pressure of work and social pressure. Towards the middle of the program, it's not very pressure. Towards the end of the program, it's pressure about career choice. Where do I want to go? Where do my spouse want to go? Where do my partner want to go? What does that first step mean? Is it a step back? Am I taking a step back to go forward? There's a lot of questions that they have to address. So that support mechanism is pretty critical. At the very beginning of the program, we have, I would say, our bonding mechanisms, if you like. with the program, which tend not to be social, they're more structured. So our leadership faculty put together an intense experience of group work, of teamwork, of team simulations, all filmed. There's coaches giving feedback on your behavior in those situations. And it's a great starting point, in addition to surveys and so on that are telling you, okay, this is how people see you, this is how you see yourself, this is what it means when you've answered the questions in this pattern. I would say it's a fairly classic grounding that people have before they start on the journey. And then with their coaches, they're setting objectives. How do I want to develop over the year? What do I want to practice? What behavior do I want to get rid of? I need to be more conscious of. What situations do I need to avoid? What situations do I need to now be slightly more careful of and manage in a particular way? So I think that those three platforms, if you like, the leadership classes, the in-depth leadership experience with the coaches and doing all these team simulations, and finally the personal development elective, which is the Jungian analysts. Those are three critical platforms. In addition, and I did say to you that running all along, the big case study of the year is the class itself.
Right.
Because I'm coming back to this point of we're not teaching leadership. We're providing the language and the insights and the opportunity for people to self-reflect so that they can learn leadership, so that they can learn the behaviors that are going to be valuable to them in the future, so that they can learn not to be dominant in meetings, or they can learn to be more dominant in meetings, so that they convey confidence to their teams. And so, we're giving them an agenda that then they need to to work on during the course of the year. Given the theme that we've got, Matt, for this particular conference, responsible leadership is also a very much important part of our agenda. And it will be in most schools. It should be in most schools. It would be glib to say all leadership should be responsible leadership. We shouldn't have the preface of responsible, because it's good leadership should be, and rewarded leadership and recognized leadership will be responsible. Unfortunately, that's not the case, because we mix up leadership with seniority. And what we find is there are many people in seniority who are irresponsible, who are making big decisions in corporations, in government, in society, that are having massive consequences and negative implications for us. So yes, an idealized version is that all good leadership is responsible leadership. But we take an opportunity in our class called Business and Society, which we introduced a few years ago, and it's now a very, very significant core subject that we deal with, to look at leadership dilemmas and to look at societal dilemmas around sustainability in particular, but not just sustainability, good business. Doing well by doing good is a catchphrase that you'll have heard, and that we try to bring into the classroom through examples, guest speakers, detailed analysis of tricky situations for managers that we know companies have had to deal with and we've written cases on. So by the time you come through all of that, I think you've got this participant has a really good grounding. And I would lay on top of it that those coaches that they meet at the beginning of the year, they don't go away. They don't vanish into the ether. They come back on a number of critical occasions where we think it's going to be very valuable to say, hey, stop. Now we need you to reflect on the last X months or X weeks, whatever the big activity is, so that you can have the opportunity to continue to learn and to calibrate what your progress has been so far. Right. We hear from our participants that this is transformational. It seems to me it is. And I'll explain why. Because I meet the participants, I meet the applicants to our program, and I see something in them. We all do. We agree who should join the program. The fascinating thing is, who then is successful? I can tell you this, that success in the program on grades has no correlation with success in the world outside. None. None. I think it is fabulous that these people have worked hard, get good grades, and accomplish what they do in class, and they should be rewarded for it. Great. But that is not a prediction of who will be successful. I look at the entire class, and I genuinely have the point of view, each of these people will do something amazing in their life. Each of these people now knows what it is. None of these people will be overwhelmed. None of them will be bamboozled. None of them will be tricked. These are not just smart people anymore. These are people who can, as I like to say, they can return the serve no matter the speed, the spin, the position. They know how to deal with complexity, aggression, life, and they will succeed because of that. I am totally, I have total faith in them. Doesn't mean I'll invest in all their businesses, by the way, but I have faith in their ability to be responsible leaders, to be successful leaders, and to achieve what they want to achieve. And not everyone wants to achieve the top, for example.
Right. And if we go back to the origins of that, you described the assessment days, for example, that are part of the admissions process that John looked at with wonder, you know, this just heavy implication to handpick, you know, around 100 individuals that are typically, you know, from more than 40 nationalities. Now, in holding up that mirror during the 12 months of the program and all of that self-learning, presumably then working with the rest of your classmates, you observe the groups that they've naturally or unnaturally then created. You know, that's adding to that learning environment and learning to lead others who may be very, very different from themselves.
Yes. Yeah, I think, you know, what we strive for is diversity. We want different types of people in the room. People with different backgrounds, people with, you know, some people have very privileged backgrounds. Some people have zero privilege in their backgrounds. Some people are from really tough parts of the world for living and doing business. Others are from relatively easy places in the world to do that. Some are from authoritarian regimes. Some of them are from liberal democracies. It is awesome to have all of them in the room at the same time and for them all to be equal. And you know, yeah, some individual may take a point of view in the class that I don't understand why Matt is in the room. Matt doesn't live up to what the rest of us live up to. Well, take responsibility for that. Believe and trust in the same process that gave you the seat in the room. That other person got that seat in the room. The same wisdom was brought to make that decision. How that person is now in the room will be a result of their capability, which we have absolute confidence in, but also their frame of mind as they go through the program. Now, you complainer about this person, what can you do to understand the situation and to change the situation? How can you help? That is, you know, we try to do it. Of course, we encourage people who need encouragement. And I would say that, you know, the biggest blocker during such a development program is where the individual just finds it too hard, just finds it tough going. The reflection, all the honesty, and they get very weary of learning, and then they turn in. They start looking for excuses. Everything's going wrong. Nothing is right enough. And they become very noisy. And we see that all the time. And, you know, some of these people, I wouldn't say all, but, you know, the majority of these people are amongst the most successful when they leave. So it is an experience. What we see is they go through a crucible of a crisis of confidence, maybe. But because they're in the right environment, because they get so much support, because they can see such good practices all the time being played out, they emerge from it. And one of the fantastic assets they emerge with is this tremendous bond as a class. So yeah, I know that other schools will have, you know, great bonding within a section. We have an entire class that's very well bonded. Even those people who are struggling, struggling socially within the class, they emerge super strong. And they impress me, actually. So, of course, as a dean of a program, you're part of your job is to be a policeman, and part of your job is to be a rule maker and taker and so on. You have difficult conversations with people. It is part of my responsibility is to have those difficult conversations, not to explain to the class why I'm having the difficult conversations, but it's important to do it. So I wouldn't say you always end up in the most friendly terms immediately, but over time, what you see is there's great understanding, because every one of these folks is going to emerge, and within a very small number of years, not the long number of years I waited for this, but in a very small number of years, they're going to be in the same situation where people are looking at them, judging them, where they're going to have to make judgment calls that not everyone's going to understand and expect. That is a fantastic, opportunity for them to understand and analyze. They see people, particularly in the last 2 years, who've had to make, people like myself and the management of IMD, who've had to make very tough choices to keep our program going. And we did. We managed to keep our program on campus. I was about to say on the road, on campus, not virtual. This is an in-person program. From the very start of this year, from the first week of January this year, we've been in class every day. And the experience has not been compromised, and it's because we make difficult choices every day, and those aren't always easily understood or experienced, but it's part of the learning experience. Everything that's happening around you is a learning experience. What we have is a heavily curated learning experience, so we know pretty much where the pressure points are going to be. We know what we have to do to try to relieve them. We know when we don't want to relieve them. We know when we're okay with it building. And we're okay with our stance on various aspects with the students because of this. Gosh, Matt, I'm not even sure I'm answering your question anymore.
I think it's lovely just to sort of how you managed to capture and distill the sort of experience that I think, because many candidates will look at MBA programs. Of course, they're naturally considering career outcomes, and your graduates have remarkable opportunities at a global level as they come out of the school. And IMD, by Forbes calculation, it's the strongest ROI of any MBA program in the world. Perhaps, for our viewers, a final question would be, as they think not just about those future job titles, but as they think about the kind of person that they want to become, and the experience that you're then going to offer them, what advice would you have for the applicant as they think about business school and the journey at IMD?
Try to imagine what it is to be a leader. Pick a leader that you have admired, that you have followed, or pick a political leader that you might be familiar with. Pick in any domain, pick somebody that you think this person is a leader, and try to figure out what their day looks like. Try to figure out, what does it actually mean? Why are you attributing that label to them? Understand where the power lies, why you're a follower. And I think you will already begin to acquire the analytical approach that we want you to understand the real nature of leadership. There's no type. Forget this notion of the charismatic leader. It's part of it. It's not all of it. It's other things work too. We can see that. It doesn't take long to find examples. They can learn a lot before they come. Now, one tip that I always give to our participants is, you're earning an MBA. That is not a leadership development program. An MBA is not a leadership development program. Our MBA is a leadership development program, but it's still an MBA. So you've got to absolutely nail accounting, finance, operations, marketing, strategy, and so on. Do a bit of pre-work. Get that out of the way. Come in ready to focus on what you need to focus on. Don't spend the first month grappling with the basics of accounting, because you should have done that already. Get it out of the way. Really accept commit yourself to this learning journey. Ask yourself, having examined some leaders and what you think they actually do, ask yourself, do I have the vocation for this? Am I willing to sacrifice for this? Because it is. You know, real leadership, responsible leadership requires sacrifice of time, of family time sometimes, of choices. You know, you're on the stage, you're being watched. You don't have the personal freedoms anymore. So it is an enormous privilege to be a leader. Mm. It is an enormous privilege, but it comes with enormous responsibility. And, you know, don't think, certainly of our program, don't think of it as a meal ticket. I got my MBA, check box, move on. Don't think of it as a meal ticket. We take our responsibility incredibly serious to develop leaders and to offer them the opportunity to learn how to be great leaders. I respect that choice that we have made. And we try to find out in the admissions process if you're serious about your leadership journey and how you want to develop. We're pretty confident we've got the right people in the room, and we'll continue to have the right people in the room. And this is just an amazing enterprise that we have. I hope it continues to be a great and strong brand in the space, but you have to submit yourself to a reflective and responsible leadership development journey. And we will hold you accountable for that during the year. And we will grow together, and we will see you emerge. What you tell us is a transformational experience. And we need more of these people. And that's why we do it. That's why we do it with great passion. So we do it with enormous commitment at the institutional level and from everyone associated with the program. We know just how important this is for society. We can't afford not to have good leaders in place. When I say good, I mean good and responsible. I mean wise. I mean people who can deal with smart, can deal with complexity. Our world is alas, littered with people who don't make that cut. And the small contribution we can make is offer 100 people a year an enormous opportunity to be part of an exceptional group of world leaders.
I think, well, as one great political leader said, you know, we don't go to the moon because it's easy. It is hard. And I think, you know, what you've captured in this last half an hour, you know, speaks to individuals that are highly motivated, have that energy, have that curiosity for self-learning, and it will be matched step by step with your commitment day by day, you know, to take them on this journey. I know that Anna obviously has walked us through the admissions components in the panel during Centre Court, but Sean, thank you for sharing perhaps a little more of the insight of the philosophy of the school that, of course, you've been part of for 24 years with such passion and such joy. It's lovely to gain your perspectives on responsible leadership for this festival. And I hope we actually get to do this face-to-face very soon.
That would be great, Matt. And I look forward to whenever that is. Thank you for today. I really appreciate the opportunity.